Let's talk about the number 11. The number 11 is the number of transcendence. It is associated with Leonardo da Vinci, and it is considered a genius pattern because it is sort of like somebody who can spread a wide net and have a really wide umbrella and then pull a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this and a little bit of that and pull them all together, digest them, and spit out something that is unique and different. It is the number of invention. It is the number of transcending the old forms. It is called the synthesizer. So it's a person who wants to bring a lot of seemingly extraneous pieces together. Now, the problem of the number 11 is that it's kind of all over the board, because if it's a really wide umbrella, it's like you're noticing all these things. And so I use the metaphor of Leonardo da Vinci because he was like an incredible synthesizer, and he was an incredible genius, and he was an inventor, and he did so many things. And so I like to say that, he painted, studied anatomy, watched the birds, made helicopters, was an alchemist, was an inventor, was an engineer, spoke 3 languages, and traveled. So he was known as an incredible procrastinator, but he wasn't procrastinating because he was intentionally doing that. He was trying to pull all these extraneous pieces together. So in using Leonardo as the example, the church said, paint the Last Supper. And the wall was wet, and the paints and the plasters weren't working well together. So he went over here and he was creating new paints and new plasters. And the church is saying, finish the wall. And he's like, no, I'm finishing the wall, but I've got to, create these new paints and these new plasters. And they're like, no, you're procrastinating, you're distracting yourself, you need to finish the wall. And so, but in his mind, he actually is, okay? And so then he finally says, all right, I'll finish it over here. And of course, it fell apart and it didn't work very well. So this is the number of ingenuity and invention. It's that creative thinking outside of the box kind of energy. The problem with this number is that you'll feel like you know a lot about a lot of things, but you'll wonder if you're the master of any one particular thing. But when you get this 11 positioned in different places, you didn't come in for one specific thing. You came in kind of for a smorgasbord of a lot of different things. So, you didn't want to be bored. Like I always say, 11s don't want to be bored. They want an interesting life, and they will change just for the sake of change because they get bored. So 11s are notorious for, doing tons of jobs. And so I tease them and I say, it would probably be easier for you to tell me what jobs you haven't done than the jobs that you have done, because, they were the waitress and they were the secretary and they were, they worked in a lab and then they, cleaned houses and then they helped somebody with accounting and, they end up doing all these things. But there's method to the madness, because once again, they're trying to pull all the knowledge and all the skills and all the tools and all the awarenesses from all the lifetimes into this conscious body and spit out something unique. And so sometimes you have to gather up your tools. And so I call this number the sacred tool keeper. So they're trying to pull so many things together. And there's a genius if you can juggle 30 balls in the air and know where you are. And even if something's not manifesting as quickly as they want it to, it's still an incredible skill to be able to keep like lots of different various ideas happening all at once. You see 11s a lot of times in jobs like technology, where they have to find an error in 16 million lines of code. There's a great example. So, I don't even understand how that brain works. You can tell I'm not an 11. So, they just like, woo, they can take in so much information and somehow make sense out of it to kind of synthesize it down and go, blah, like this is the bottom line right here, okay? Now, because of that, they do this very quickly. So most people, kind of do things like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and they get to Z, right? And 11 is operating circularly. So to them, they go A, Z. So to them, A and Z are next to each other. So they just skip all the B, C, D, E, F. So they kind of go A, Z, A, Z, A, Z, A, Z like this. And so they're fast. They're like super fast. And you kind of look at them and go, how did you even figure that out? And they actually oftentimes can't explain it themselves. They're like, I don't know. I just like there it was. It's like Albert Einstein, trying to figure out something, and then he falls asleep and he wakes up and goes E equals MC squared. I mean, that's an 11, right? So the 11 pulls information, also it channels information from higher planes. So whereas we talked before with the 7 is very structured, and it's trying to create maps to subtle energy so that they can recreate subtle energy. So people who are 7s are the astrologers and the palmists and the numerologists and all these different things, because they like to have a repeatable structure that helps them make sense out of the chaos that is life force energy. And 11 is just pulling things out of thin air. They don't know why they know things half the time, but they know things. It just like hits them out of the blue. So trance channelers are usually 11s. People who speak to the dead are usually 11s. They just don't know why they know things. They oftentimes have some sort of a map that they're using. So they're oftentimes an 11 and a 7, so that they create a map to like explain the subtle energy that's coming in. But there's a beauty to it because it's so spontaneous. It's a little rebellious, to be honest with you. So if somebody has a gift of an 11, they're a little rule breaker rather than a little rule maker, And I think if you look at Leonardo, I mean, he was cutting up dead bodies when it was like a lot. You were killed by the Catholic Church if you cut up a dead body, and he's like cutting up dead bodies because he wants to know what's in it. I mean, he's breaking all the rules. And, he was a notorious rule breaker, and the only way he got away with it was he was protected by kings. So the problem with the 11 is that when it's not allowed to express itself in authentic ways, it can twist and distort. And then you end up with a fractured, fragmented person. And then you get people who are drug addicts and alcoholics and obsessive compulsive people and bipolar people. And so whenever you're looking at the numerology and you start to see a lot of 11s, you start to question, like, is this person fractured in a couple of different places? And what is that fracturing looking like? Now, sometimes fracturing can cause genius. So, history is full of people that were badly damaged and abused as children, but somehow their brain decided to focus in one area that they were brilliant in, and that became their gift. And so, that's fine too. But whenever you get like an 11 with a 3, and so if you remember the video from the number 3, it's about devil and divine. So you get the rebellious 11 with the 3, which is devil and divine, and you get this duality thing that they're kind of like looking at things all over the place. You can definitely get a person who, has some cognitive dissidence, let's say it like that. You can get some people that have personality disorders. You can get some people who, like I said, are bipolar or have a learning disability, because that 11 can fracture a spot. But I like to think of people that are fractured as a raku pot. So raku pottery has a fractured glaze, and what makes it beautiful is that fractured glaze. And it's not a pot you can eat out of or drink tea out of. It's a pot that's so iridescent and beautiful you set it on the table like a piece of art, but it's a little fragile and it'll break. I like to think of sometimes 11s like that they're beautiful, they're brilliant, they're a work of art. I mean, they're spectacular, but they are a little delicate. They are a little fragile, and you don't want to hurt them more, than they probably already came in dealing with. And yet you want to support them in their genius, but you don't want to support them in places where they get too obsessed or they get too extreme, because they can get very, very extreme. And so, I remember one time, it's like, I had a boyfriend in my life that was an 11-3, and he was bipolar. And I would wake up and he wasn't there, and I would go upstairs and I'd be like, "Are you okay?" And he goes, "Oh, I'm having a manic episode." And I'm like, "Okay." So I said, "So what does that look like?" And he said, "Well, my mind is telling myself I'm the smartest person in the world and everybody's an idiot." And he said, "I know this is just my manic side." So he said, "I learned that I can interrupt my manic side, but I can't interrupt a depressive episode." I thought that was really interesting. So he was sitting there saying, "Stop, stop, 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 stop." So whenever you're dealing with a person who has an 11-3 or a lot of 11s, they have to learn some mental self-control, and they have to recognize that they don't have impulse control very well. And they have to figure out tools for themselves to balance that out and regulate that, because otherwise they go, 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 crash burn. Go, 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 crash burn, right? And that's like, like that's really stressful. And it's exhausting for other people who are with them or living with them or trying to help them. So it is that place about knowing themselves and recognizing that they're trying to synthesize a lot of information together and learn how to take calculated breaks. But what I found is that 11s kind of do everything to an extreme in some way. And that doesn't mean it has to be bad. I mean, you can have healthy extremes. You could have a health nut, so that the weekend warrior or the person whose hobby is to do model planes and they're obsessed with it, right? And I go, I'm fine with that. I mean, like if that gives you joy, that's terrific. But if the obsession becomes cocaine, or the obsession becomes sex and getting sex at all cost, or the obsession becomes getting what you want, even if it hurts someone else, that to me is not the best idea. So, finding that middle ground is difficult for an 11. They weren't designed that way, but it will help them in their life if they can find that better harmony, that better balance, that better neutrality. So the 11 is a visionary dreamer. It's kind of like some people are walking on the ground and some people are flying in the air. And 11 is flying in the air. And from this vantage point, they can see everything. They can totally see everything. And they can see trends. They can see patterns. So, there are people like the Bill Gates of the world and, the guy who did Apple, that, they're so smart that they're forward thinking and they see a trend. Those people are often 11s and 11-3s. The other thing is 11-3s are oftentimes like the visionary for an unusual company. Again, like the Bill Gates and, Steve Jobs and stuff like that. But any 11-3 needs somebody who's a 5-7 in their company, because the 5-7 is like, okay, you know what, Bill, that's a great idea, but we've got a budget and we've got to figure out a strategy or a plan. That's the 7 to make it happen, which is the 5. And so we can manifest this in the physical realm. And the 11 doesn't like that kind of restriction. The 11-3 wants it right now, no matter what. And they will tend to surround themselves with people who will let them get away with that. I because I worked in Beverly Hills, it's like I dealt with a lot of 11-3s, because 11-3s are very good in the film industry because it's about visions and seeing things and possibilities and creating worlds and all that kind of stuff, which has to be an 11. They have to have that. But in doing that, they will surround themselves by a whole bunch of sycophants, because those people are feeding off of this brilliant genius power person, but sometimes they're also enabling him or her. And so then they can kind of continue to get away with crazy stuff and bad behavior, which we see right now happening in the world, that, these people that had terrible behavior are now being called out because they were obsessed with sex and they were manipulating starlets and stuff like that. And trust me, I saw plenty of that when I was in Beverly Hills. So, there's, with all things, with all numbers, there's a good and a bad to both sides. And so finding that the place that allows the genius, allows the brilliance, allows the forward trend, allows the inventiveness, but helps them stay grounded. But, these people will have a tendency to surround themselves with people who let them get away with it. I mean, and they will push away people who are truth tellers. They will, because they don't like that. They want to do what they want to do when they want to do it. And they oftentimes think they're smarter than everybody else. And the problem is that they kind of are. So it's kind of a problem. But, that balance is there. So again, the reason I wanted to talk about these numbers in a different way is I really feel that at this time in the world, everyone needs to have understanding and access to all the numbers, whether they are a part of that number pattern or not. The reason I know what I know and I can do what I can do is that I've had thousands of teachers and they're all my clients. And I've learned so much from people who have number patterns that are not mine. And seeing what that pattern is, and seeing what the trend is, and seeing what the gift is, and seeing what the value is, but also seeing what the pitfall is. And learning to see both sides of all things is important. So whenever you get genius in astrology, numerology, the number 11, whenever you get genius, you get eccentricity. Always, always, always. Okay, and so you can't have that brilliance without a quirk. Okay, and I want people to start looking at everyone in their life. Like, how are they great? How are they not great? Where are they wonderful? Where are they your worst nightmare? And try and find the truth in that, because I think that what I've learned in my life is you can take a person who is an asshole, and yet I know if there's an asshole in there, there's also a really beautiful, sweet side that the asshole is protecting. So I have learned, instead of engaging the asshole, I engage that sweet part. And I learned to work with that sweet part and not engage, not step into the mud of the part that feels like a dragon and has to defend itself, right? So I think the more you understand numbers and the more you understand each other, the more powerful it is. So many years ago, my mother had this friend that lived in Houston, and she was a sweetheart. And my mother gave her my numerology book, and she called me, and she, with this beautiful Texas accent, and she's like, "Oh my God, you have just explained everything about my entire family to me." And I had no idea that I was projecting onto them my pattern and my priorities and my agenda, and that they don't have a clue about that. Their numerological pattern is totally different, and they don't have any interest whatsoever in doing that. And I'm like, right, that's the value of this. It's like that we start to see each other and understand each other from a place of compassion, rather than, well, what's wrong with them? I'm like, what's wrong with them is what's right with them. They have a number pattern that they came in to learn. And the more you can support them in doing that without you needing them to do it your way, the better it is. So, one of my ex-husband, he had an 11-3. He was a genius. He was brilliant. And I learned that, unfortunately, most of the time he was right. But I had trouble seeing it because he just, had so much that was happening simultaneously. So fortunately, I'm a psychic. I'm a 9. So I'm like sitting there trying to track all these threads so that I can make sense out of what he's saying, so that I can relate it to my experience, so that I can make the appropriate changes that he's obviously seeing, but that I was blind to. Right? And that's the value of it. I think that we're all trying to help each other. I think we're all trying to say, would you look over here? Like, this is the problem over here. And we don't, we don't do that. And that's unfortunate. So that's what I want, is I want everybody to start to see the positive and the negatives of each number, understand each other. And again, my entire numerology class is online. You can totally get it. It's right there, so that you can do this for your friends and family and help to make sense and help to alleviate some of the conflicts that are happening. I remember years ago that I had a client that there was an upset with the grandmother, and I did the numbers and explained the grandmother to the granddaughter and to the mother in such a way that I formulated a letter for them to give her for Christmas. She read the letter, burst into tears crying, their whole family dynamic completely healed, and they had the best Christmas they'd ever had. And she called me and was like, "Oh my God." And I'm like, sometimes you have to speak in the language of the number. You have to speak in the language of the pattern of the person, because then they feel heard. Then they feel understood. Then they feel honored and respected. And so it's so often, we keep trying to push our agenda on other people. And I go, it will never work. It'll never work. But what will work is for us to understand, this is my pattern, own it, integrate it, ground it in, be authentic with it, don't be arrogant with it, and then learn someone else's pattern, and then how can we work together? Like, how can I use the information that I have inside to support this person in being the very best person that they want to be because of their numerology, not the person I want them to be. And it's so freeing for that person when they no longer feel attacked, because oftentimes your pushing will make them feel attacked, which is not what you're trying to do, right? But they came in to learn a certain set of things that's specific and unique to them, which may or may not make sense to you, and that's okay. So, the number 11, the number of transcendence, the number of consciousness, how do we transcend and integrate and synthesize all this information from all the lifetimes into this conscious body and then do something constructive with it? All right. Thanks, everybody.